Welcome to our broadcast. Tonight, Mike Nichols introduces us to two very promising young actors from his school, the New Actors Workshop. But we begin with Mike Nichols himself, a man who's helped redefine American theater and film. With his partner Elaine May, Mike Nichols forged new comedic ground in the late 50s by improvising on real-life situations. His Broadway directing debut with Neil Simon's Barefoot in the Park earned Nichols the first of 6 Tony Awards and a reputation for having the Midas touch. Elizabeth Taylor requested him to direct the movie Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, but it was his second film, The Graduate, which captured the mood of a generation and won him the Oscar for Best Director. The quintessential actor's director, Nichols has propelled artists including Dustin Hoffman, Jack Nicholson, Cher, and Whoopi Goldberg to stardom. His latest hit is Broadway's Death in the Maiden, starring Gene Hackman and Glenn Close and Richard Dreyfuss. It just closed on Broadway. Welcome.
Thank you.
Pleasure to have you here. I said to you earlier, just listen to this for me. You start with 1960, An Evening with Nichols and May, Barefoot in the Park, Love, Odd Couple, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, The Graduate, Catch-22, Carnal Knowledge, The Day of the Dolphin, The Fortune, Family on Television, The Gin Game, Drinks Before Dinner, Lunch Hour, Guilt Alive, Fools, Lillian Hellman's Little Foxes, Plaza Suite, The Prison of Second Avenue, Uncle Vanya, Streamers, You Produced Annie, it goes on. Silkwood, Whoopi Goldberg, The Real Thing with Jeremy Irons, Social Security, Waiting for Godot, Elliot Loves, Heartburn, Biloxi Blues, Working Girl, Postcards from the Edge. Regarding it just goes on and on. It's a body of work.
Yeah, I didn't do Fools.
You didn't do I gave you credit. No, it never happened, did it? What happened?
Well, Fools, I went to help out a friend for a week, and then they said that I directed it, but I hadn't. But everything else, I have to confess to.
And you must look back now. I mean, you look forward because you're thinking about the next project. But when you were with Elaine May, did you even think about directing as something that might be your métier?
No, the strange thing that happened was that Elaine and I did it because it was the only job we could get. We started this, there was a group in Chicago, which was started by my friend Paul Sills, who's now part of the New Actors Workshop. And Elaine and I were in that group. It's where we met. And I went back to be in the group because I couldn't get a job of any kind in New York. And then we did this, and we kept thinking that this was what we would do till we started our grown-up lives and got grown-up jobs. And it went on, and it turned out that those were our grown-up jobs. Then when Elaine and I split up and stopped the act, which was in '61, I didn't know what I was. I was the sort of the leftover half of a comedy team. And then St. Suber, the producer, suggested that I try directing this play called Nobody Loves Me, it was called. And I said, well, why don't we try? It was in summer stock. Why don't we do it for a week? I said, I'll do it if I can get that guy that I saw in Playhouse 90. It was Robert Redford. So we rehearsed for a week and we did it. And during the week of rehearsal, I thought, this is it. This is what I was supposed to do.
But it has been said, and you may have said this, that there was, between the two of you, she was the brilliant idea creator, and you were the person, even within the improvisation of the skits, that knew how to move it along, had a sense of what?
Yeah, well, I had the sense of the shape of it for the simple reason that I wasn't as inventive as Elaine. Elaine could go on.
Self-deprecation, Mr. Nichols.
I think it's true. Elaine was enormously inventive and still is, and she came up with these characters, and she could have gone on. But I was through after a certain amount of time, and I needed to move it on. And also, therefore, I learned improvising is a great thing because you learn what the audience wants. The audience says, okay, why are you telling me this story? And you learn that you have to provide certain answers. Because it's funny is one answer. Because it's you is another answer. But because of the pressure from the audience while you're improvising, because they're constantly, in an unspoken way, of course, saying, so, yes, what's your point? That pressure somehow is a great crucible for teaching you what a scene is made of. Elaine used to have a rule, when in doubt, seduce. Because
now, how do you mean seducing, as you and I would understand seducing the audience by?
No, seducing me.
Oh, seducing you. Oh, I see.
Because a fight is what are the things that are a scene? A fight is a scene. A seduction is a scene. Right. Not that many other scenes are a scene.
Right.
And
it's either love or conflict.
that's right. And when in doubt, seduce is very useful because, or if you say black, I have to say white.
Right.
And these elements of theater are taught to you in this hot crucible of the audience saying, come on, show us something, entertain us. So that when I started directing, I discovered that unknowingly, unconsciously, that's what I had been preparing to do.
Why did you split up?
I think Elaine didn't want to go on. It took a lot out of her, these performances. For me, I said, this is a great job. It's 2 hours out of 24. Yes. Why are you suffering?
We're pretty good at this.
Yes, and it was a good living. We made nice money, and I had all this extra time. I didn't have to do anything during the day. Although people did keep saying to us, what do you kids do during the day? Because the suggestion was that we couldn't possibly be doing only this. It was hard for her, and she didn't want the pressure of flying around and being in nightclubs, and then we were on the stage, we were in various theaters. And she wanted to take a break, and we took a very long break. And during that break, I began directing, she began writing. She wrote screenplays, and she made some movies also, as you know. She made some brilliant movies. And then we ended up as...
That would never happen on a Nichols set.
It happens on every set.
Then you realize that you're going in different directions. Now you occasionally appear together again. There was a thing you're going to do out in Los Angeles, I think, for the Clinton campaign or something. How do you feel about that? I mean, is it almost like old time and the magic of being on stage again?
Well, it is. It's still there. We did a benefit for an organization called Friends Indeed, which is an AIDS center, and we did a benefit a few months ago in a theater. We did a whole show together with Simon and Garfunkel. And we hadn't done this together really for 30 years. So that although we rehearsed, we didn't know what would come out. And it felt very strange, but the pleasure was that the connection between us, the fun, knowing what the other one was going to do, was there as before. We've been very good friends.
Was the timing there?
Yes. It was. It would, all the things that we didn't know whether they would come back. Because, you know, I worked with a great actor once, Marcel Dalio, who did his scene and everybody applauded. And then I said, thanks. And he said, you know, I was saying to the makeup man that if you're an actor, you have to pray every morning for a small miracle because you can't make it come. You can only hope it'll come one more time. And that's how we felt. We couldn't force it, and then was it going to come? And it did, and it was a strange but interesting sensation.
Let's assume that with all that you have done and all that she has done, that somebody comes and says, how about a month on Broadway, a month, an evening with Nichols in May? Would you do it?
I don't think so. I don't think so for a very strange reason, that for me, I can't speak for Elaine, and I don't think it's true for Elaine, because she stays graceful through all of it. But performing for me turns me immediately back into a baby. Immediately I'm thinking, you know, is that light in the right place? And is that the same applause we got last time? And are they really waiting for Simon and Garfunkel? Performing makes me a child, and directing makes me more of a dad. And it makes me happier.
It makes you happier? Yeah. Because you feel more...
I'm thinking about others. Yeah. I'm concerned with how it's going to be for the actors and the writer.
When you started directing Barefoot in the Park, say, did you say, this is for me, I know? You walked to work the first day. Did you say?
In rehearsal the first day, I said, oh, here it is.
I'm an adult.
This is what I do. I didn't know what I did, and now I know. This is what I do. All the time studying with Lee Strasberg. All the time in Second City and Compass before it. All the time reading, for reasons I still don't understand. When I was 12, I read all of Eugene O'Neill. All the plays that I had seen. I saw Tennessee Williams, I saw Kazan's Streetcar, I saw Death of a Salesman. All this, I was really studying to be a director. I just didn't know it. And now I found my job.
When you went to do Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, the first film, Were you confident about that, this whole new arena? Because you had always loved movies.
I certainly wasn't confident. I go into a sort of semi-narcoleptic state, and I try to terrify myself. Yes, I remember I drove into my space, which is very important, your parking space in L.A., and it said my name, and there was the sound stage.
Mike Nichols, the director.
Yes, and I said, okay, now wake up. You're directing Virginia Woolf with Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton. This is, come on.
Yeah. This is as good as it gets.
But I couldn't get excited because of this sort of narcoleptic thing that happens to me. But I certainly wasn't confident. I didn't know how you shoot a movie. Yeah. And if you were to care and look at Virginia Woolf, since we shot it in sequence, you can see me learning as I go. Yeah. The first day, we were shooting them coming home through the door, and I knew I couldn't say this to the cameraman, but I said to an actor friend, I said, listen, won't the door hit the camera? I was deeply worried about this. And he explained about long lenses, and then I spent a couple of days, of course, before I started shooting, a couple of weeks, I'm just trying to understand the lenses, and I think that what Orson Welles said is true, that the technical aspect of movies you can learn in a day, certainly in a week, and how to use it, you could spend many lifetimes.
How to use the technical stuff. Yeah. We'll come back. I want to talk more about the process, and also this notion of, you were said to be an actor's director. Where does all of that come from, and what in the world does it mean? I mean, Alec Baldwin was here the other day, and he had, I guess, in Working Girl, he had a role there, and I'm not sure if he's worked with you before. He said the thing that was incredible about you was the sense of authority. You said, do it this way, and this is the way I want it, and that he, as an actor, needed that. And I've had other actors say, I need a director that lets me expand, lets me know that I'm free to do what I want to do. And I assume there's some connection and understanding where the actor is coming from.
Yeah, I think you have to have an instinct that tells you what will turn each individual actor on. Things are different for all of them. Their images are different. The things they imagine are different. I said to Glenn Close when we started working on this play, because I was beginning to learn a little bit about her earlier life, which she's now beginning to speak about. Right. And I said, some of these difficulties would be very useful for you in what you're working on in this part. And she said, you know, I've never used anything in my life. I've only used my imagination. I said, great. You know, I mean, there is no right way. You know, you pack your own bag. And when you understand what is in this particular actor's imagination, then you have to try to feed into that and call on that. And then, of course, it's the director's job to tell the story, to determine what is it that's happening. Never mind what they're saying, because what's happening is always different from what they're saying. It is right now, it is in life, but it is even more in movies and in the theater.
Let me pick up on that. Mike Nichols is here, and it's a pleasure for us to have him for this special one-hour conversation. At the end of the broadcast, we'll meet some young actors who are working in a workshop. Back in a moment. Stay with us. Yeah. Neil Simon is here. No, Neil Simon's not here. We were just talking about Neil Simon. Mike Nichols is here. Let me just figure about context about working with actors and what is happening. How do you get that? Do you want to know everything there is about an actor? I mean, do you watch?
No, that's his business.
Right.
What I want several things. I want the right actors for the situation so that it can really happen. Yeah. I mean, the extreme example of that is if someone is meant to be terrifying and powerful, then you're better off with George C. Scott than with somebody mild and small. It has to really happen, so that you have to have the people to whom the situation can happen, and then you have to figure out what's happening at any given point in the story and help the actors have it happen to them, which means my job is the physical life too. What are they doing? Where are they? How does it happen? And my theory, it's not mine alone, is that if actors are doing the right thing physically, and the situation is correct, and they're the right people, all they have to do is show up and it should happen in front of the camera.
And when it doesn't happen in front of the camera, I mentioned to you during the break, Meryl Streep and Robert De Niro, two people that I admire enormously, as I suspect you do.
Indeed.
There was that film they did that it didn't happen.
Well, that was Brief Encounter.
Right.
It was a remake of Brief Encounter.
Called something else, I think.
Right. Brief Encounter, if you remember, the Noel Coward picture, was a very touching idea. It was two very unromantic, ordinary, suburban people swept up in a great passion.
Right.
And it was their ordinariness and their littleness that made it so touching. Elaine and I did a parody of it, you know, in which he's a dentist and she's a patient,
Yes.
because it was about the ordinary. The people who remade it forgot, and they got two quite romantic, attractive people. Then there was no idea.
Yeah.
Then it was just a story about an extramarital affair. But the very center of what Brief Encounter, but what the idea had been, was forgotten.
Which is ordinary people caught up in a passion that's beyond their own experience.
That's right. And then, I mean, it would have been, if you want to remake Brief Encounter, and I don't know why you would want to, because it's a perfect movie, but once you decide to do it, then you have to get Kathy Bates and I don't know, Anthony Hopkins.
Yeah.
You have to get people who are completely unromantic. Because you can't ask, the one thing you can't ask of great actors like Meryl and Bob De Niro is to change themselves into something they're not.
Some people say that's what happened to Frankie and Johnny, and Al Pacino and Michelle Pfeiffer, the very same thing.
Yes, you could make that case.
Film.
You could say that the whole point of the play of Frankie and Johnny was a woman who at first didn't appear very attractive, who, as the evening went on and as she took off her clothes, became beautiful, so that you went through the same process that the leading man did, so that one fell in love with her. If you have a great beauty doing it to begin with, and a man of enormous power, it's another story. And that's what I'm talking about, saying getting the right people so that the things that are meant to happen can happen.
Have you ever cast wrongly and known it?
Sure, sure. And I've changed actors because they were cast wrongly. Gene Hackman and I joke about the fact that I fired him from The Graduate because he was not the right, he was originally, because I knew he was great and I wanted to use him, and he was Mr. Robinson for a couple of days of rehearsal. And then he and I both said,
Not me.
no, it's not here, it's not your part.
Yeah.
Of course you make those mistakes.
And Anne Bancroft was brilliant.
Yes, she was.
And was Hoffman brilliant?
Absolutely brilliant.
Made the film.
Yes, but I mean, the thing about Dustin was that I was desperate. I had seen every actor in that age range in the English-speaking world. And then said,
Yes.
I said, and we were looking for what, as Dustin put it, a walking surfboard, you know, a blonde guy, a California guy.
Yeah. Not Dustin.
Not Dustin. But then I kept thinking, I remember this kid that I saw in an off-Broadway play playing, I think it was a fishmonger.
Yeah.
I said, let's get him and test him. And he came out. And the thing that happened with Dustin was that the minute we saw the film, he had something that I've seen only one other time, and that's Elizabeth Taylor. He was much better in the film than he was on the floor when we were shooting it. There are,
You mean when you saw it on the screen? Or?
yes.
Yeah.
There are people who somehow collude with Technicolor so that in the bath overnight, their performance is enormously enhanced. Elizabeth is such a person, and Dustin is very much such a person.
Can you tell about them? I mean, there are people who say that people like Redford, for example, somehow that process overnight, the celluloid and whatever happens in the bath and all of that, when he comes out the next day, he's more powerful, better looking, all of that the camera loves him and it somehow transforms him.
Well, it certainly loves him. I don't think it transforms him. Redford is a superb actor.
Yeah.
I mean, in Barefoot, he was the dream actor. You could say, as I said to him, I got an idea. Why don't you have a cold? He said, okay, and he had a cold.
Yeah.
He was a real actor, and he came up with great ideas. It was his idea to carry his mother-in-law all the way up the stairs. He also, of course, looks great, and the camera does love him. But his gift, the fact that he's a true actor, was there right from the beginning. It gets forgotten because he's a great star.
Yeah, people begin to think that it is more the power of the present than it is the talent that's there.
He's a real actor.
After Virginia Woolf and after The Graduate, and you had done by then Barefoot in the Park, Love, Odd Couple 2, I mean, you couldn't be any hotter than you were.
True.
How was that for you? And did you think this will never end? I am home free.
Funny you should say that. I remember I was the man of the moment in Hollywood, and there was some dinner at somebody's house, and I was in line for food with my agent, my then agent, and standing in front of me was Joe Mankiewicz, and he turned like somebody in one of those English horror movies and leered at us and said to my agent, "Make him think it's forever." And I was thrilled. I loved Joe Mankiewicz because, first of all, of course, I knew it wasn't forever.
Yeah. You did know.
Of course.
Yeah.
Second of all, I knew that in a way, real life wouldn't start until the first failure. And what I was saying at that point was, come already, let's go, let's go, let's go. And Catch-22 was kind of a failure. And I was thrilled to see that I was fine. I sort of enjoyed it.
In other words, you wanted failure to come so you could deal with it and move on beyond it because you knew it was inevitable in your life?
Yes. And also to stop this crap of, Mr.
Midas
Golden
touch.
Yeah. It was all some hook that somebody made up. Everybody is on a pendulum.
But did you say at any point, I'm not this good? They're giving me attributes and talents that I don't have. And in my best day, I'm not as good as they think I am.
Of course I said that. At every point I said that. And I also said, let me remember this so I have a little bit of something in that bank for when they say I'm no good at all.
You'll know how good you were.
I'll know that isn't true either, that I'm no good. It's somewhere in the between. Look, we all live and work on a pendulum. We certainly work on a pendulum.
Yeah.
And I love the pendulum because as it's swinging into the crap, into the bad part, it's gathering energy to swing back.
Where is it in its arc right now?
I have no idea because I don't look.
Yeah.
I never look at that.
I mean, you just had Death of the Maiden. Were you happy with that?
Yes and no. I was happy with...
Death and the Maiden.
I was happy with our work on it. I thought it was a really interesting play. I loved the three actors. Yeah. I thought that I made some mistakes with it and that there were some problems that we didn't solve. And then it was tough for the actors. It was tough to see them. I mean, it was a limited run, but it was 6 months for them. To see them with things that they found difficult and never completely solved in the play.
And you couldn't help them?
Not enough. Not enough. There are also people that are so used to the freedom of movies, doing something. You do something for 10, 12 weeks and then it's over. And I really felt for them when they couldn't get out. They
they realized they had this 6 months thing,
That's
and
right.
I don't have it, and it's not quite right. And not even knowing how to make it quite right.
We worked. We kept working.
Yeah.
And some, like almost every play that I've ever worked on, some nights it's fine. Some nights it's right. But the best thing about the theater is also the hardest thing about the theater. It can't be perfect every night.
Were they coming to you and saying, it's not right, fix it, Mike, fix it for me?
Not so much that. We would talk to each other and say, now, what about this and what about that? And let's work on this. And they would get mad at, as actors always do, get mad at the play itself and say, but it doesn't give me the... I say, but it's there, Yeah. It's there. We just have to find it. But overall... What was wonderful about it was that it was always full. The audiences gave them standing ovations. People were very arrested by the play. And in that way, it was fulfilling for them. I think it's nice to do a play that's about something.
Yeah. A powerful idea.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very serious.
I got a lot I want to talk about. Mike Nichols is here. Let me ask this before you go. What about regarding Henry? Were you happy with that?
I was, again,
I'm trying to figure out where you are on the arc. That's
right, I understand. You have to understand that I'm never happy with I'm always happy with my life. I'm never happy with a picture. I can't. I only see what I might have done, what I could have done, what it should have been. I loved the performances in Henry. I loved Harrison. I loved Annette. I loved all the performances in Henry. I think there are things that I could have dealt with that made better.
Mike Nichols is here. Back in a moment. Stay with us. Mike Nichols is here, and we're going to talk later about the commitment and the craft and teaching acting and all of that in just a moment. Let me just stay with you. You are a happy man.
Yep.
We're looking at a guy.
Right.
But has it always been that way? Because there was a period after when you did was it Days of the Dolphin?
Right.
You know, in which you were in that sort of narcoleptic period. Is that where that was?
Oh, Day of the Dolphin was an obligation that I had to Joseph E. Levine, and like a fool, I thought the important thing was to get rid of the obligation. And I made two movies that were real failures in a row, Day of the Dolphin and then The Fortune.
Right. And The Fortune had great Stockard Channing and Jack Nicholson and Warren Beatty. I mean, how could you screw that up?
Well, it's always story.
Yeah.
It's all about story. Do people want to see this story or not? There were hilarious scenes in The Fortune. Jack Nicholson has a breakdown scene where he confesses to the cops that's as funny as anything he's ever done, but story is all anybody cares about. And at that point, although I had no plan to, I just stopped making movies. And people mostly thought I was scared, and I thought I was looking for something that I really was certain I wanted to do. And it's startling to realize now, I didn't make a movie for 7 years.
And what were you doing during those 7 years?
Oh, I was doing plays. I did a lot of plays, I think.
Yeah.
I produced Annie. I raised horses. I collected paintings. I did all this stuff.
Right.
And then I got interested in both in Silkwood and Meryl Streep doing Silkwood. And as we began to work on Silkwood, I realized that this was a picture about a person, Karen Silkwood, waking up, and that was what was happening to me, and that's, in my eyes, what Silkwood was about.
But what had you lost? I mean, you have said that you lost the pleasure of directing. Did you lose it because of those particular films that were no good or that weren't right for whatever reason, or did you lose it from some other reason?
I can't be sure. I just know that I lost the fun of movies.
Yeah.
It wasn't there for me. And when I started again, when I was working on Silkwood, it came back much stronger than ever before. It had a lot of emotion for me.
So you owe a lot to Meryl Streep.
Oh, yes. Yeah. And to that project, and to the waking up process, and to discovering that I'm a big believer in, I tell this to the acting students all the time, in downtime, in the time when you're not working on something or not even thinking about it. Those 7 years of not making movies taught me more about making movies than the years I spent making movies.
What did it teach you?
Relax. Right. Be light on your feet. Prepare the hell out of it. Prepare as much as you can, and then just show up and see what's going to happen today. Because what you're looking for every day is one little surprise, something really happening that nobody expected, one little extra moment that's by the grace of God. And usually it happens if you relax.
But you can't force it.
You
can't create it.
No, you can't. You have to hope it'll come.
Yeah. And this is the thing about God. The actor gets up and just pray to God that he can do it, or she can do it.
Let it happen again.
But do you know what causes it to happen? Can you create an ambience that'll happen? Can a director make sure that any of that?
Yes, you can't make sure.
But you can.
But you can sort of seed the ground. It's like seeding a cloud and hoping it'll rain. The things that I learned from watching Jack Nicholson, we've made, I think, 3 pictures together. The things having to do with the way you deal with the company, with the crew. After all, they're the only ones there. Yeah. They're acting for them.
How does he deal with them that makes it noteworthy to you?
They are his friends. Jack cannot start acting until everybody, all 120 people on the set, are his friends. Yeah. And when he's acting, the lady behind the wardrobe truck that's taking care of his pants for the next scene, that's his friend too. And their love is what lifts Jack.
He's infused by the support that they give him from just sheer caring.
That's right. He's connected with everyone on the set. He's connected with everyone on the street. At a preview of a movie, Jack will stay after the preview and talk to people and say, so well, how did you like it? He's right there with everybody. And that's what we see on the screen. I now finally, having thought about, you know, all the things we all think about, faces and so forth, I think that the camera sees your nature in the end.
What do you mean?
That when you look at a career like Nicholson's, that he's spiritually a very advanced person. He has an enormous nature. It's very positive. It's very loving. It's very generous. And that's what we see. Whoever he's playing, good guy, bad guy, in between. Sometimes you see an enormous nature straining at the bonds of the character, like in Carnal Knowledge. Sometimes you see a sort of Dostoevskian self-parody out of rage. But whatever he's doing, he does two things. He allows his nature onto the screen, and he brings everything to him. He doesn't ever pretend to be anybody else. And who else could you be? Yeah. You're you anyway. So that act of letting everything come to him, and yet whatever anybody says of the character is true of him.
Have you ever wanted to put yourself in your films?
Never.
Not once?
No.
Not for a moment?
No, it doesn't interest me.
At all?
No. There's always somebody better, even for the moment. There'll be somebody that I would rather see.
What's the joy of it? What's the pull of it? What's the magnet of directing for you?
Well, the magnet of directing a movie is that you beat the hell out of the script, and you do it again, and you do it again, and you keep trying to tell the story. You say over and over, okay, then what happens? And what happens next? And then what? And what's after that? Because that's what the audience says. They just always say, then what? Yeah. And you cast it as well as you can, and you work with the director of photography and the art. You do all this, and then it takes you over. It starts to tell you what to do. At a certain point in shooting, the movie picks you up by the scruff of the neck. And
Even
says,
a movie which is shot out of sequence?
Absolutely. It just creates its own life. It decides what it's going to become. Just like in the cutting room. There are pieces that are jumping because they're alive, and there are people that are just laying there dead like a lox. And you just automatically learn to cut out the dead pieces and let the life feed the life.
And how is stage different, theater different?
Well, theater is about right now. Theater is about, this is happening for the first time now for you tonight. Yeah. And it's about the connection with this actual audience, and that's its excitement. And for the director, it's a very different thing. A play is largely about where everybody is on the stage. It's about the physical staging. It's about who the actors are. The reason that I'm besotted with movies is this mysterious thing where they take you over. Where they become, movies are dreams anyway. The movies are our dreams, the ones we see, but the ones we make are too.
You'd rather make a movie than direct a play in
At the moment. It goes back and forth. At the moment, absolutely.
It has been written about you that after Virginia Woolf and after The Graduate, they said, this is the guy who's going to redefine film, and he's going to do all this stuff. And that you became somewhat less of that. You became not this auteur, but something else. Are you comfortable with that? Do you buy into that? Does it make any sense to you?
Well, you know, it's the thing that it's the only thing anybody ever says about anybody who does very well in the beginning. Orson Welles told me that, first of all, he said, never think about how you're doing in relation to that kind of concept that other people have. Never think about, is it this, is it that, what is the shape of my career? He said, let them do that. You just do it. But he said that there are lives that, he was speaking, of course, of himself, that start high somewhere and then are a kind of descent. And he said, speaking for him, that he wouldn't have had it any other way, that was a thrilling and exciting life to have. Yeah. I say, this is the only observation ever made about an American artist. It never goes in the opposite direction. You can't name someone. When you read up, and I read in a film encyclopedia about Preston Sturges, one of my heroes. His bio said, you know, he made this, and he made Palm Beach Story, and he made The Lady Eve, and so forth. Lost his talent at 52. It says this in the encyclopedia. I said, lost his talent? Are you nuts?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, he made 8 of the greatest comedies we've ever had. Not enough. He lost his talent. That's how it looks when you're right on top of it. How it looks later, we don't know.
You also make an interesting point. You say that there are 2 kinds of lives. Those where you find success very early, Kennedy, as you point to. Others where you find it later. You lived through certain acts because of early beginnings in your childhood, because your parents had to flee Nazism, came over in '38. You followed father physician. They split, you know, moved to Philadelphia, and all those kind of things. But you said that there's a difference in that if you find success later and it just grows and grows and grows, the problem is you live forever with the hard times. Do you really believe that? That it's always there?
I don't believe that anymore. I tell you what I really think is that there are 2 kinds of people. There are people whose lives are one arc, and they're always the same person. And then there are people who are a succession of really rather different people with different lives. And I think of myself as one in the second group, that for the whole first part of my working life, I was very angry. And I still am in touch with, as they now say, those feelings from a tough childhood, as everybody had. And the difficulties that you overcome that then make you, you can finish it yourself. I just heard a weightlifter say it yesterday, talking about the Olympics, because he had some kidney difficulty and he became the strongest man in the world. We know that one. But that there seems to be another part where you finally let go of the anger and actually experience your life. All that time that I was winning Academy Awards and the man of the moment, I didn't really experience it very much. I did kind of think, well, when is the part where I get to love this? It sounds great, it looks great on paper, but I'm not feeling anything so terrific. And that came much later.
There are those who say that your life view has changed a little bit, and you may have said this, that there is more a positive view about life and the world, and more of a sense that there is generosity, and that generosity leading to something.
No question that I feel as though people, if you're not generous, you finally expire. You know, that if your life doesn't
There's nothing
lead
at the
you,
core.
Yes, you have to at least encourage the generosity in yourself and try to be more generous and live as generously and as forgivingly as you can. It's the only way to survive. I said to my son, I was talking about someone else, and I said she has to learn to forgive her parents for her own good. And he said, tell me that, sure, we have to do that. We have to forgive
Your son
her.
said that to you.
Yes. And I was proud of him. I was glad. He knew it very early. Yeah. We have to forgive.
Mike Nichols is here. We'll take a break and we'll be right back. Stay with us. Here is that quote that I read. Somebody said, and I just want you to, and this, so I get it right. It said, Nichols was never the cinematic savior some wanted him to be. He is a man who's looking for things to do, not a man who has things he wants to do. I have a hard time believing that somebody's observation about you, that you are waiting for things to do rather than looking to do something. If you are, what is it that you are looking to do, that you, Mike Nichols, wants to do?
I'm not certain, because it changes so much, but I think what I really want to do is all get together, you and me and the actors and the cameraman and the audience, and examine our lives right now and what's led up to them right now, and see if there isn't something better, if we can't learn something from it, if we can't express something about ourselves that will help us go on. I mean, you could make a case, I now often do think, that we may be after the end of the world here. It may have already happened while we weren't noticing it.
You mean we've already set in motion the things that are going to destroy us?
Or that the moral end of the world has already taken place, and this is afterwards. That you could make a case, if you wanted to, that there hasn't been a first-rate major work of art anywhere in the world since World War II. You could make a case that except for physics, which is the living thing right now, there are no ideas. You could make a case that there are no more stories. Things are very tired. We know that. Individuals are remarkable, and individual lives are still remarkable, and courage still exists, and people who try to serve something beyond themselves still exist. And I like, first of all, I like to make people laugh because it's a way to point out the truth. And I'm always hoping to find some metaphor for what is happening to all of us, together and separately, that will be healing, that will make things just a tiny bit better. This doesn't have a whole lot to do with politics. I'm not a political person. And it may not be possible, but that's the search. I like the idea, when I go to a movie, that I know something about my life that I didn't know before. And I may not be able to put it into words, but this used to happen to me all the time. It happened to me with Jules and Jim. It happened to me with Persona. Right. It happened to me with numerous Fellini movies where you say, oh my God, I know that guy. I am that guy. That's me that we're watching up there, and my feelings. If you can still startle and involve people, it's a nice thing to do.
Why is it not happening now then? And why don't you feel more of those experiences when you go? And why aren't you producing and making those kinds of films and theater pieces?
I don't know the answer to that. I do know that Marshall McLuhan had a terrifying and true idea. It was so true that we disappeared him completely. The moment he said it, he was gone.
The medium is the message.
There is no Marshall McLuhan anymore, but his idea that the world changed in the moment when everyone knows everything at the same time. Information used to take a long time to spread. You'd hear about it, you'd read about it, it would go through the mail, people would tell each other, you'd read the newspaper. Now, the morning that you wake up and you say, you know, I'm changing the way I feel about Perot. I don't know if he's as interesting as I thought he was. That's the morning that he's 8 points down in the polls, because it's happened to everybody at the same time. We all have access to the same information. We all have the same experiences. We all see the guy do the belly flop in the Olympics at the same time. Everything that happens is happening to all of us at the same time. And I think I thought of what I really think it is, that starting with the 6 million Jews and followed in this country by the assassinations and by seeing them, everybody had the same experience. You saw Kennedy assassinated. You saw Oswald shot. You saw Ruby arrested and the funeral, and on the 5th day you said, yeah, well, what's today? What's the show today? Real events supplanted fiction. I think they just blasted fiction off the map, because real events were not only overwhelming, they were everyone's experience. They were what you watched on television. And they were happening to everybody simultaneously, so there was no art, which of course deals in metaphors. There is no metaphor that can come up to killing 6 million Jews. What would that metaphor be?
No one can imagine anything that
absolutely not
heinous.
No. So somehow this flattened art, fiction, theater, movies in a way that they seem to have trouble recovering from, except in extreme works of imagination, like Terminator 2, which I thought was a terrific movie.
Why? Because?
Because it was a very powerful metaphor, and it was fascinating to watch. And it was beyond what we watch every day, what we're looking at all the time anyway.
Yeah. But you bought Fatherland.
Yes.
To make a film about what would it be like if Hitler had won.
Yes.
Why?
Because I've never been able, having been part of it in some way.
Because your parents escaped in 38?
Yes, because I escaped, because
Right.
I was 7 years old in 39 when I came over, and I was 2 weeks away from that boat that was turned away by this country and went back. Because it was like the bullet whistled by my head. I've had a sense of many things, of guilt, among other things. And I have never been able to deal with the 6 million. I was going to do Sophie's Choice. I couldn't do it. I knew that I couldn't stand there and say, all right, all the Jews over there, and all. I couldn't do it. But I think that the way Fatherland deals with it, to come all the way around and do it from the point of view of an Aryan German who discovers, there's no one, just as no one knows how many people Stalin killed. If Hitler had won, nobody would have known how many Jews were killed.
Because they would have written the story themselves.
Yes.
And covered it up.
We'll never know about Stalin, and we would never have known about Hitler. But for a man who is a Nazi to discover this, have you read Fatherland?
Yes.
Did you not feel when you got to the Jews, did you not think this is impossible?
Yes.
This could not happen.
Exactly.
And that's...
And there's still pockets of that in the world today.
Yeah.
We'll say. It's a pleasure. We're out of time. I thank you for coming. I hope we can do this again. It really was an extraordinary time for me.
Enjoy it.
Mike Nichols, as I promised you before, in the beginning of this broadcast, we're going to do something with some people in a workshop. We're going to do that now. You will see that at another time, either before this airs or after this airs, but you'll see it. Again, my thanks to Mike Nichols. See you next time.